Welcome to this recording of a lecture on the time derivative of a rotating fixed length vector. Now, this material is not really covered in the handbook in Merriam and Craig, and because of that, a short set of notes on this topic is included in the supplementary notes on page 15. Now, let's consider a vector R of fixed length, but rotating in the xy plane with an angular velocity vector omega equal to the scalar omega times k, where k is the unit vector, of course, in the z direction, and since the xy plane is represented in the plane of the screen or the plane of the board, the k direction, of course, is out of the board. And if we use a right-handed axis system, we see that the k direction is coming out of the board towards the viewer. Now let's talk a little bit about this vector R. This vector can be any vector. It does not need to be a displacement vector. In the context of this course, we will first be looking at displacement vectors. But this vector R can actually be any vector that is rotating in a plane. Now, this vector R is indicated in this sketch as this vector. You see that there's a bar, a vertical bar with a subscript T, indicate that this is the position of the vector R at a certain time point T. Now, this sketch further shows the vector R at a different time point, a small time increment delta T later, indicated by this subscript T plus delta T. And so clearly you can see how this vector is rotating in the xy plane. Now, during this small time increment delta T, we can say that the vector R rotates through a small angle delta theta, and the magnitude of this angle delta theta can be calculated as the magnitude of the angular velocity of rotation omega times delta T. And of course, this small angle delta theta is actually indicated in this sketch. Furthermore, we can now define a third vector, delta R, which is really the change in the vector R over this time increment delta T. And mathematically, we know that such a change in a variable will be defined as the variable value at the end of the interval minus the variable value at the beginning of the interval. So using that rule, delta R is simply R at time t plus delta t minus R at time t. Of course, since these three are all vectors, we need to then calculate, in this case, a vector difference, which is really the same as a vector summation, but where one of the vectors has got a negative sign. So since this vector R at time point t is the one with a negative sign, the vector addition will give us minus R at time t plus R at time t plus delta t, and thus the resultant vector is delta R, indicated over here in this sketch. Now, let's further define two unit vectors. The unit vector E sub R is defined as the unit vector in the direction of the vector R at time point t. The unit vector E without any subscript is defined as the unit vector in the direction of the vector delta R. I can now define a third unit vector by taking the cross product of unit vector coming out of the plane of the board or the plane of the screen K with the unit vector ER, and I define that vector as E sub t. And since this unit vector E sub t is normal to both K and to E sub R, we see that E sub t is a unit vector generally in the direction as I'm now indicating with the cursor, with the hand cursor here. Now you should realize that this vector E sub t, this unit vector E sub t, is not the same as the unit vector E, because the unit vector E is not normal to unit vector E sub r, or normal to the vector r at time point t, because of the fact that through the rotation of delta theta, this delta r is not normal to the vector r. So there's a small difference in direction between the vector E and the vector E sub t. However, we can say that the limit, in the limit, as delta t goes to 0, the direction of the unit vector E will approach that of the unit vector E sub t. In other words, as delta t goes to 0, this delta theta will also go to 0, and the more delta theta goes to 0, the closer delta r becomes to being normal to the vector r, and the closer the vector E will come to be in the same direction as the vector E sub t. Now, what we'd like to do here is to calculate the time derivative of this vector r. Now, if we don't think about this very carefully, we may be tempted to say that the time derivative of the vector r must be 0 because this vector is of fixed length. Its length doesn't change. The important point to see here is that it is a vector, and the vector has two important properties, namely magnitude and direction. And even though it's true that the magnitude of the vector r in this case does not change with time, its direction does as a result of the rotation. And because of that, because of the fact that it's rotating, its time derivative is not 0. And that is what we now would like to calculate. Now, using the mathematical definition for the derivative, that would be the limit of the change in the variable, in this case the change in the vector, divided by a small time increment, and then namely the limit as this time increment goes to 0. So this is the correct mathematical definition of the time derivative of the vector r. Now if we analyze this to see what it means, of course the numerator in this fraction is simply delta r, as we've calculated already. And we can now say that delta r has a magnitude equal to the magnitude of the vector r times delta theta. That is its length. And its direction, of course, is in the direction of the unit vector E. Now, in this, the delta theta we've already calculated as omega delta t. And of course, in this expression, we can now see that the delta t's in the numerator and denominator will cancel. And we'll be left with the limit of r omega times the unit vector E. Now this can be simplified once we realize that in the fact that we've got r omega in the limit doesn't really matter. They just have the specific values. They don't change. R is a constant length, and omega is maybe a variable angular velocity, but it doesn't go anywhere specific when delta t goes to 0. It simply goes to the value of omega at time t. So the only thing that is left to take a limit with is the direction of the unit vector E. And we've seen that the limit of the unit vector E is simply E sub t. So we've now shown that the time derivative of the vector r is simply of magnitude r omega and in the direction E sub t. If we, however, bear in mind that E sub t is defined as k cross E sub r, and we substitute this into this equation, we have, of course, this. And if we now realize that we can now group the scalar multiplying the cross product, we can group the scalar with either one of the vectors in the cross product, or we can even, it's quite valid, to group part of the scalar with one vector and the other part with the other vector. So we can group the omega with a k and the r with the e sub r. If we do that, we find that our time derivative of the unit vector r is simply the cross product of the angular velocity vector omega with r. And this is a very, very important conclusion. If we have a vector, it doesn't matter what vector it is, any vector that is rotating, we can calculate its time derivative by simply taking the cross product of the angular velocity vector of the rotation with the vector itself. Now this is a very important principle also in dynamics, and specifically when we consider the possibility that this vector r that is rotating is a position vector. The sketch that I have here comes from the handbook. It is figure 5.4 in the handbook, and it indicates a rigid body, which is indicated by this blue slab. This rigid body is rotating about a fixed axis through the point O, which in this case is this vertical axis. Of course, this is a three-dimensional sketch. Now, since this is a rigid body, the point A always remains at a fixed distance from the point O. The point O now being the point where the axis of rotation intersects with this rigid body. This means, of course, that the point A is going to move in a circular arc indicated by this orange dashed line as this rigid body rotates. Now, the angular velocity of this rigid body is shown here with this green arrow along the axis of rotation. And of course, its magnitude is theta dot, which is also indicated with this circular or semicircular green arrow. Now, if we would like to answer the question, what is the velocity of this point A? Yeah, sorry, before I get to the velocity, I first need to point out that we can now describe the position of this point A by the vector r from the point O at the axis of rotation to the point A. So if we now want to answer the question, what is the velocity of the point A? We can say that the velocity of point A would be the time derivative, the first time derivative of its position vector. It will be r dot. Hence the velocity of point A is omega cross r by virtue of the theory that we've just now derived. And since this cross product must be normal to the two factors in the cross product, the velocity must be normal to the vector omega, and it must also be normal to the vector r. And the only possibility for that would be this vector, the green vector v, which is seen then to be tangential to the circular arc in which the point A will be moving. We can next look at the question, what is the acceleration of this point A? Now, the acceleration of point A will simply be the first time derivative of the velocity of point A. So it will be v dot. And if we now substitute our definition of v as omega cross r into this, we see that we have the time derivative of a cross product. Now, it is true that the cross product satisfies the product rule of differentiation. So it means that the time derivative of the cross product would be the time derivative of the first factor on the cross product cross the second factor, plus the first factor cross the time derivative of the second one, which is what I've expressed in this equation. Omega dot being the time derivative of the angular velocity vector, and r dot, of course, the time derivative of the displacement vector. Now, the time derivative of the displacement vector was already calculated, so we can substitute omega cross r for the r dot here. And omega dot, the time derivative of the angular velocity, is the angular acceleration vector of this body. So we find that the acceleration vector of point A is given by alpha cross r, where alpha is the angular acceleration of the body, plus omega cross r. we now have a double cross product, and as I've pointed out to you earlier in the revised cross products, it's very important to indicate the sequence in which the cross products in the double cross product needs to be calculated. And certainly the last cross product must be calculated first, because we essentially need to calculate R dot. Therefore, we put this last cross product in brackets. One way of looking at this is that the acceleration of point A consists of two components which are normal to one another, although that is not apparent as yet, but we'll see that in a moment. And we can indicate those two components with A sub t and A sub n, the tangential and normal acceleration components, where the tangential acceleration component is the alpha cross r, the angular acceleration vector cross the position vector of point A. And the normal component is the component coming from the double cross product. Now, why do we say they are tangential and normal? Well, it is true that for two-dimensional motion, and we limit ourselves in Chapter 5 to two-dimensional motion, to planar motion, it is always true that the angular acceleration vector is in the same direction as the angular velocity vector. In fact, I should even backtrack a little bit and say that it's always true in planar motion that the angular velocity vector is normal to the plane of motion. In this case, this blue slab-like body, this is essentially the slab of an approximation of a perhaps a body that doesn't look like a slab, but in the plane of motion, as we've seen in the introduction of Chapter 5. And in planar motion, it's then always true that our angular velocity vector is normal to this plane, because the motion itself takes place within this plane. And if there is any rotation, it needs to be about an axis normal to the plane, otherwise it will not be planar motion. Now, since the angular acceleration is the time derivative of omega, the fact that omega is always in the direction normal to the plane, it means that the direction of alpha cannot be anything but also normal to the plane. If alpha had a direction away from normal to the plane, it would mean that the direction of omega would change. And if it were to change, it will no longer be normal to the plane, and hence we will no longer have planar motion. So alpha and omega both must be normal to the plane. Of course, they may change in direction. They may be going down. It's possible to have omega going up and alpha going down. It may be that it's possible that both of them go down. In other words, that corresponds to a sign change. But both of them must always be normal to the plane. Now, if alpha is normal to the plane, and I look at the direction of the cross product of alpha with r, using the right-hand rule and realizing that this cross product must be normal to both alpha and r, we see that the direction of the tangential component of the acceleration is in fact tangential to the circular arc of motion of point A. So this direction is correctly indicated here. We see, in other words, that the tangential component of the acceleration of point A is parallel or in the same direction as the velocity of point A. Now, the second component, the normal acceleration component, coming from the double cross product, if we now realize that the second cross product in the double cross product is the velocity, it means that this double cross product is essentially the cross product of the angular velocity vector with the velocity vector of point A. So it's once again the cross product of a vector in this direction with a vector in that direction. And so because of that, if we use a right-hand rule, we see that the direction of the resulting vector is in the direction from point A towards the center of rotation. Hence, this acceleration component is called the normal acceleration component because it's normal to the trajectory at point A. It's normal to the circular trajectory of point A at that instant. And This then also clearly shows that the normal acceleration component and the tangential acceleration component are normal to one another. With this, we have now proven equation 5.3 in chapter 5. And having proven this, you should realize that the equation 5.2 in chapter 5 are merely the scalar equivalents of the equations 5.3. I'd like to ask you to now, on your own, work through sample problem 5.1 at the end of the introduction section of chapter 5. Thanks.